What's good? What's good, everybody? This is Josh Sheckberg and my friend Kenny. How are you doing, Kenny, today?
Not bad, Mr. Redbird.
Yeah?
Oh yeah.
Any same cigar or different cigar today?
Same cigar, just a little bit bigger.
Yep. Well, yep. I made a
That's what she
mistake with
said.
my tea. I made a mistake with my tea. I don't know if you've ever bought tea bags or anything, but like there's some that come with loose, and then there's some that are in the bags.
Yeah,
Well, I ended up buying the one that was loose. And so you have to kind of have like that filter.
yeah,
Well, I thought, oh, I'll just grab a spoon and just take the stuff out. And bro, there were so many of those tiny things everywhere
yeah.
that I eventually just kind of set it aside and said, I'm not going to worry about that. So I ended up going with coffee this today.
Nice.
So we'll go from there. But bro, I wanted to start this podcast a little different. I know I introduced you to this guy, but this guy has been my favorite person to listen to. So let's watch this real quick.
Amazon driver in Georgia has been fired after a video of him driving on a sidewalk was posted to TikTok. The video shows that driver steering his delivery van down a sidewalk in an Atlanta suburb. The user who recorded the video believes the driver was going 35 miles an hour.
He said I was doing 35 miles an hour. How does he know that is his eyes speedometer? How does he know? That's how people will be driving and they won't mind their business. Of course, I was on the call because we do curbside delivery. Yes, it says ETA now on the van. Yes, so we do curbside delivery. The closer I can be to the to the side, the closer I can be to the house, I can just pivot, do like that, and I'm at the doorstep. How do people think all their packages arrive? Yeah, so I don't know.
In a statement, Amazon called the off road act, quote, reckless and unacceptable behavior.
Well, I don't know who wants to even be doing delivery even. This nonsense brand that doesn't even have AC. So it's fine. They can take the job, but I'm trying my best. They say delivery. People order things and they want overnight shipping. Sometimes we have to deliver the thing on the same day. That's how I was eating lunch on my 15-minute lunch break. We don't even get the whole 30, 15. And I had to leave it. I ate 2 spoons of my rice. I didn't even drink water. I had to drop back in the van to go and start delivering package. And what are people buying? I don't even know. So I will drive on the curb again. That's how I meet my quota. I will tomorrow. I'm going to drive on the curb. So if they don't want me to drive, they should come and collect the key from me. Then that's how I know I'm not doing again.
We caught up with the driver on his last day of work. The driver says he's unbothered by the criticism and is looking forward to his future prospects.
Personally, I don't really care, to be honest, because I've already applied to UPS. So this job, this work, I don't want to do again. If I'm being honest, my heart is not in it again. So anything they want to do, that's fine. All the people that be driving, they won't mind their business. They wonder why there's so much accident on the road. It's because people be not mind their business. I'm going to my second job. I'm going to my second job because people think this job is my life. It's not anything. I will change and I will go to my second job because I have mouths to feed. I have 4 children. 3 of them are my own. The other one is not my own, but it's sort of my own because it's my wife's child. But you can't feed only 3 and leave the other one to starve in the house. You have to feed that one too. And that one eats. That's the one that just be eating mother. And that one eats 4 people's food. So you see, you're wondering why I'm driving on the side. All the things I'm thinking in this country, all the things that's in my head, feed it.
Dude.
Yeah, so I've checked out a couple of his videos, and he's pretty good. He's pretty funny. And like I said, I sent you that text. That is definitely a Nigerian dude. That is an Igbo man right there. 100%.
You know what's funny with a person like that is like that guy has to be a smart individual. Like
Yeah,
there's something about like you know what I'm saying? Like he's very observant of for me, it's like what I really appreciate is he's very aware of his surrounding. He knows what's going on. and he's found some humor to kind of explain this industry in a way that's humorous, but in a way that's um, I don't know. I love good comedy, and I feel like this is the guy I can just watch over and over and over.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think you can do comedy without having some, I mean, some semblance of a brain. Comedians are just not just, but they're like cousins too. They're just more fun philosophers, you know?
Yeah. Hmm.
Like you don't want to
Hmm.
sit down there and you don't want to sit down there and talk to a philosopher over lunch, man. But
Yeah.
it'll be bloody awesome talking to a comedian over lunch, you know? Um, yeah, I like his stuff. I think
Yeah.
I like the one about the changing your name, taking your wife's name.
Oh, dude, that was.
He's,
What is that?
he said, he's just pricing it too high. Let's
Yeah.
start something down.
He
So
said,
funny.
"What
Let's start
was it? Was
starting.
it like? Dude, was the price 100,000? Like, would you change your last name
And
for 100,000?
no, 1 million. Well, it
One
starts at like
million?
1 million. Yeah.
And he's like, no, no, no. You start too high. Start at 2,000. Start doing. Dude, what I love about that skit is when he's like, essentially, he's like, "Is that all you want? Like, I'll do more for $1 million." He's like, "I'll do more than your last name."
Like if you want me to change my whole identity, I can do that too.
Yeah.
Like I'm just saying that for 1 million, I can do more. I just don't want to cheat you out of all the things you could get for 1 million, you know?
Dude, I think one of my favorite. I think one of my favorite one was like, the house is burning. You have $20 million. So you could save the $20 million. You could save it's like your wife. You can save your mother-in-law, and you can save your dog. Right? What are two things you would save? And he said, "I'll save the $20 million." And then he said, "I'll save the $700 that I have under my bed right now." Oh, dude,
The guy's
dude,
good.
dude. There's something about comedy that just like I've heard somebody say that there's two platforms they think that need to be protected at all cost.
Yeah.
One they said was pulpit, right? When it comes to religious stuff, that's what they
The
said. And then the
pulpit.
other one, like not like specifically to Christian, but like a person that's like a religious person to be able to communicate to his people what he wants to communicate to them. I just said a pulpit just so that we have somebody.
Sure,
But
sure, sure.
the other one was comedian.
Yeah.
And I know throughout history, comedians have played a very important role in kind of like, because they're the only ones really that could go against the kings. Am I right? Have you heard of this?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you're supposed to, right? Like the
Yeah.
fool. We're talking about like the classic idea of the fool, the court jester, and so forth.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how you know you have a good king, right? He can,
Mm,
he tolerates um, being made fun of. He tolerates the dickfoolery, right? But the minute your king is like, oh no, 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 we gotta stop this shit. You know, you got yourself a
yeah.
bad king. I think no comedy. I think comedy is one of those things that it has to be protected. Comedians play a very important part of society and society. Comedians help us. They 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 help us see things as they really are, right? One of my favorite comedians is what's his name, John Cha. What's his name? Sorry,
Who's that?
damn, no, McDonald. Norm Macdonald.
Oh, Norman. Oh, didn't he pass away like a couple years ago,
He
right?
did. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yep.
this dude is something else, man. Take my grandson. He's young and fresh. He's talking about like he's when he's about to die, and like death's got the sickle by his neck, and he's not gonna be brave. He says I'm gonna look at death and I'm gonna say, "Take my grandson. He's young and fresh."
Dude, you know
Uh,
some comedians that I really appreciate. I recently got to get to know him a little bit. Not get to know him, but hearing his comedy. Dude, I didn't know much about George Carlin until like the last couple years.
George Carlin. I don't
That
think I know who George Carlin is.
So he's a comedian. I mean, he's passed away. I think it's almost been 20 years.
Okay.
But he's very like I would say that you know how like what's that the political comedian Jonathan Stewart? Jon Stewart? Is that what it is? Jon Stewart, right? Does that sound right?
Jon Stewart. Jon Stewart. Yeah, yeah. He does is it the Daily Show or something?
Yeah, The Daily Show. Yeah, yeah. Jonathan
Yeah,
Stewart.
yeah,
Yeah. So but George Carlin is like very good at like going at like social issues that we have at hand, right? On talking about what's wrong with these, and he's not very like one side. I think he criticizes both sides pretty well.
yeah,
But I've started to recently really appreciate comedy that like points at what's wrong with certain policies that are established, right?
yeah,
It's like they say that if you want a kid to memorize something, right, you do it in a song format. And I
yeah,
wonder if you want people to understand the foolishness of certain ideologies, I wonder if comedy is the way that you pierce through that. You know what I mean?
yeah. Well, I think it's a I think it's a good way to start. I think comedy protects us from it protects us from bad ideology. And but at
Hmm.
the same time, comedy can be dangerous because it could desensitize you to good ideology. Right? If you make fun of something enough, everybody becomes, kind of callous or ashamed to do the thing because
Hmm.
it's not every comedian who's making fun of it, but it could very well be a good thing. But good
What kind?
comedians have talk to me.
No, no, go ahead. Good comedians. What?
Good comedians have a very strong responsibility, whether spoken or unspoken. They protect our minds. They help us they help us deal with things like death, things that are very hard, whether it's like, um, I think one of the worst things anybody can experience is rape, right?
Mm.
And then you go to death, and then you go to losing a child. Well, that's death, I suppose, but it's a different type of death. It's one of those unexpected, one of those it could never happen to me kind of deaths, right? Um, then they take us to the mundane, stubbing your foot in the morning, wrangling your kids for cereal. Um, yeah, I think comedians have a really, really important job in society, and if you silence them, you kind of kill. Um, you've kind of fucked up your culture. You've fucked up the society in a big way.
Yeah. So it's been interesting because I felt like there was a wave of so with I'm trying to figure out what I mean. I guess it would be cancel culture. Essentially, what happened for a while, right? Where you had moments where you see a stand up like Eddie Murphy, right? And I mean, delirious and raw. Like you want to talk about no filter, right? Absolutely, the hose is open on this guy. Just everything is out, right? And now you get to the point where like comedians are like almost afraid. I mean, for their career for a period of time, they were afraid to say anything. You know what I'm saying? And now it seems like comedy is kind of gaining control of the language again. I don't know if you know what I'm saying, but there was like a few comedians that said, screw it, I'm not gonna abide by this cancel culture, right? And they just
Yeah,
kept digging into it, right? I always like one of my favorite of all time. I think you and I agree with this, but Dave Chappelle being the comedian that he is,
yeah,
and as great as he is, like he rubbed people the wrong way. And when people told him to stop, he almost like doubled down, like Sticks and Stones. Like you want to talk about like not backing out, right? Sticks and Stone was, I think that was in 2016. That one was dropped, but like,
yeah. But that's the thing. So I found out George Carlin. I know him. I just never
yeah,
learned his name. And
yeah,
he's brilliant. I like his
brilliant.
stuff a lot. But Anthony Jeselnik, who's a comedian that a friend of mine introduced me to, and I think is a really good comedian.
What
Um,
was his name?
Anthony Jeselnik. It's a very weird last name. Starts with a J. Jeselnik. Um,
Oh, I heard of that. Yep.
He's dope. But he says something I think it's true. He says, you know, what are you complaining about cancel culture for? Like that's the job of a comedian, is to go against the culture, right?
Mm,
That's your job. So stop complaining. When a comedian is being a comedian in hard times, that's when comedy is most important. And that's part of the job. It, your job just got a little bit harder. You're making millions of dollars and your job just got harder, but you're making millions of dollars. What the hell are you complaining for? And so it's like a policeman saying, well, there's guns out here. Like these people have guns. It's like, of course they have guns, you idiots. That's
mm,
why you're a policeman, you know, to police the people who have guns. It's a dangerous job. Comedy is like that. It's like when cancel culture exists, that's when comedy kind of has to step in. It literally has a duty to step in. So
mm.
complaining about it makes no sense. It's um so I respect Chappelle, but I don't think he did a great thing by standing up. I just think that's what he's supposed to do. You know what I mean?
I see what you're saying. Yeah, yeah, yeah. He was just so. Would you then say that a comedian's job is when things are kind of like out of balance to make it known that it's out of balance?
Yeah, a comedian's job is definitely. I would say definitely it tells that. I would say that's definitely part of it. Yeah, they make us look at the hard things, and then they release us by helping us laugh at it. You know, whether it's out of balance, whether it's even when it's a little bit too balanced. Um, they do a lot of things for us, and I think, honestly speaking, I think they're one of the most important jobs out there.
Hmm.
Um, yeah,
When you talk about desensitize, it's interesting because I've noticed that so you talked about rape is one of those things that comedians make a lot of jokes around that, right? And it's like you kind of desensitize it, right? The other one that I think we often desensitize is, I mean, just even the person of Hitler, right? It's he becomes we forget the magnitude of the evil that was done under that regime,
yeah.
that we start to almost like label anybody we don't like with that title. And it's like by doing that, you're actually desensitizing, right? So you're not putting Hitler and his action in its own category, right? What you're doing is you're bringing it down, and like everybody becomes a Hitler because you don't like what they just said, right?
Well,
It's
everybody
like,
is a Hitler. I mean, I don't think we like to hear this, but we like to think that, hey, if that for some reason we're better than Hitler, or that we would never be like him, or we would never be like the people who joined the Nazi Party and so forth. And maybe, right? But I'm just saying that um, the things that motivated Hitler, the hatred, um, the
mm,
suspicions, the just straight up meanness, he just had the ability to execute it all. No pun intended. Um,
no,
but a lot of people feel those things, whether it's for our coworkers, whether it's for our parents or families. We feel the same type of hatred at some point in our life, whether it's for other groups in life. We just don't have the power. Somebody once said that money makes you more of what you already are. It just, not sorry, it just amplifies you, right? It's just what you
hmm
are. It just gives you an opportunity to stretch it beyond your natural, your natural boundaries, right? So power does the same thing. Money and power are very close together. I'm just saying that, we look at Hitler and we always say, well, he's the worst. Sure, he's terrible. But the truth is, so are you. You're pretty terrible most of the time. We're pretty terrible as human beings. A lot of us we just don't have the ability to
execute.
execute the things that we
Yep.
want to do, for either fear, shame, um, lack
Or
of
just sheer
resources
lack
to
of power.
power.
I was about to
Yeah,
say, yeah, lack of.
yeah.
No, I get that. I get that. I think you do bring up a good point. I think when I was bringing that up initially, I was just saying that like the acts that he did is in a category of its own, right?
Sure.
It's in its own. And so it's like when you say that somebody is this person, you just want to
Yeah.
make sure that you're not bringing this down to what this person is, but you're saying that this person behaving in a way that they themselves are bringing themselves up to the level of Hitler. You know what I mean? So it's like, how do you not desensitize what he has done over here? I get what you're saying on the individual
Well,
level,
no,
but
no,
it's
for
like
sure.
if you start, if you have a neighbor and, you know, maybe they're, again, I'm just picking an extreme example, but if you have a neighbor and the neighbor every Saturday morning is just blasting their music, right? At 7 in the morning, right? And at the same time while they're mowing their lawn, right? And if you look over at that person's like, oh, that guy, I hate that dude. He's Hitler, right? If you were just say something like that, you're like, you just you're almost you're losing the weight of what it means to be this person, right? It's similar to when you say I love pizza and it's like I love my wife. And it's like, okay, I get what you're trying to get at, but you got to understand that there's levels to these things. And what I'm saying
No,
is
yeah,
in the comedy world, in the same way you talked about rape, and sometimes the weight of comedians is that they can make certain jokes, right? And you can say they can make light of things that are serious, right? And
for sure.
sometimes they're trying to pull a point, but sometimes we just hear it so much that we just don't even feel the weight of what it is, right? And
Yeah.
it's hard to feel that weight unless you're a really, really good storyteller. And then I'll go back to Dave Chappelle. I don't know how he does this, but he has a way of making fun of something and yet at the same time educating you to a level that you walk away and you're like, dang, that's I'm laughing, but that's also something that really big eye like. When you look at something like, and I think Hitler just happens to be one of those names that often is used in the comedian world,
Yeah.
right? And you see it often in the political world, right? Every political figure that comes up, whether it's the right or left, right? That person is the Antichrist, and they are always Hitler. Those are the two things that is true about every political candidate. They're the Antichrist and they are Hitler. And that's, you know what I mean? But it's like you just keep saying that over and over. Then everyday people start to think, oh, that's what Hitler is. And it's like, no, no, like he's got his own thing over here. If you're
Yeah.
not careful, you're gonna lose. It's kind of like I would even go as far as to say like racism. Everything is racism. And it's like, no, my brother, there's a difference between the 30s, the 20s, the 40s, 1800. There's a difference between that racism and what you think racism is today. And if you
Mhm.
keep saying racism, racism, we're gonna start thinking, oh, because you didn't get this job, that's racism. It's like, no, it's having
Yeah.
to go drink water from another fountain station, right? It's you're trying to go apply for something, right? And so it's like there's levels to these things, and I think if we're not careful as a people, if we don't hold true to the weight of what these things were, right? I think it's just going to get lost in translation, and now we're going to think that any discomfort that we have, and sometimes part of the discomfort that you experience is just life, right? It's just people, just being around people, you're going to feel discomfort. And you got to be able to distinguish racism from discomfort. Racism from I just don't like you because of the attitude that you walk around with. Or maybe you're
Yeah.
just not a good person, period. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I think those are so good distinction, right? Yeah, I think there's a place, and I'm very much for it, where comedians take that which is sacred and
Hmm.
desecretize it, or they kind of, you know, um, they kind of drag it through the mud. I think that's
Hmm.
fine. It gets our goat, but I think it's fine. And then we have situations where we take things that are very bad and we try to, well, yeah, some of us, I think Chappelle does a good job of dragging it down, helping us look at it and say, no, this is still pretty bad, but it's funny as hell, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, I think both are important. And then when it comes to the racist bullshit, you know, dude, I've had so many like conversations. I was talking to a dude who was like, um, pretty black guy doing pretty well for himself. We were talking in a cigar shop, and he said he wants to leave America and go to like Africa or something like that. I was like, dude, you have no idea what you're talking about. It's like, what? It says, well, you know, there's like, a lot of racism here in America. Like, first of all, dude, you're a black dude. You make six figures. You're wearing a God knows how many hundreds of dollars suit. You're sitting in a cigar
Hmm.
lounge, smoking a cigar. You're talking to me other white folks and Asian. Like, what are you talking about? You have no
Hmm.
fear for your life. You can own anything a white man can own or an Asian person can own, right? So what are you talking about? You're talking about America's been bad. So you said you came out of the projects. Yeah, you came out of the projects. Do you know how many countries where if you're born in the projects, you die in the projects, not because of choice, but because that's it.
Hmm.
That's it. In
Yeah.
America, for me, I see it more as choice. There's opportunity for everyone in this country. I would say, if not everyone, a shit ton of the population to make something of themselves. I
Hmm.
don't, I don't like, nor do I know whether I like it or not doesn't matter, but I don't ascribe to it, and I certainly don't believe the racist narrative. I think it's bollocks. Um, but I think that, yeah, I think that things should be made fun of. Um,
Yeah.
it's up to the listener to say, okay, I'm going to listen carefully here, and you know, kind of sort myself through it, so I don't end up kind of, hardening my heart to something that kind of, desensitizing myself to something that I kind of should be paying
Yeah.
attention to. But I think comedians have that, it's their job, and they should do it and should do it well. Make fun
Yeah.
of anything and everything. And if it has a leg to stand on, it has a leg to stand on. If it doesn't, well, it doesn't. The question is, how funny is it? Is it funny,
Yeah.
and how funny is it?
I think I might have shared the story with you, but I remember in high school I wrote a paper and it was on abortion, right? And
Yeah.
talking about whether, and my position still is, but
Oh,
at
yeah, I
the
remember
time
this.
was that
I thought it
I
was
think
brilliant. Please go on.
yeah, and so what ends up happening is I was debating a girl. I remember, did very remember this girl, and I was essentially saying that if the woman gets to decide, right, that
Yeah,
whether she gets to choose or not, my position was then the man should also decide whether he gets to stay or not and not have to pay child support or anything. I think this was 11th grade when I wrote this paper.
yeah,
And I remember presenting this and like, dude, I remember like eyes were rolling, right? Not that kids like hated me or something. It was more of like, oh no, here he goes again. Like he just stirred up the pot, right? And I remember the girl that I did the presentation, and I had to debate her, and you could tell by the class's reaction that it was not going to go well for me, right? The girl started crying, and then she started coming at me in a way that I'm like, hey, I wasn't trying to come at you personally. I thought we were over here dealing with this
we're debating.
this topic. Yeah, I thought and it got personal. And like, I don't know, maybe she had that story in the background. I don't know. And I remember walking away thinking like, I don't think anybody heard me, right? And it wasn't the best experience for me, but I stood to that. And then it's funny, about what, in like 8 to 10 years later, right? I watched it wasn't Sticks and Stone. I forgot which stand up Dave Chappelle
Yeah,
did,
but
right?
I know the special you're talking about. Yeah, he does
Yeah,
the same. He
and
says the same thing.
he says the exact same thing. And I remember reading tweets about it. I remember like people on the right, like, oh, look at this, like this is excellent. I remember watching I think it was Daily Wire, but like it's just all these different stations saying this. And in my head, I just sat back and I was just like, I've been trying to tell people this for a long time, right? And there's like some sort of like, the like there's a self-righteousness that was within me with a little bit, but it was more, I think it was more out of frustration, like I didn't know how to communicate that, and it didn't get received in the best way possible, right? And and I ended up having a conversation with the teacher. Apparently, I was being harsh or something. But fast forward, right, and you see somebody like Dave Chappelle gets on a platform and he executes that perfection,
Yeah,
right? It's just, so it's just kind of like the gift that comes with being a comedian is that you can take things that on a debate platform that can seem so targeting, right? And one of the benefits comedians have is you don't get to respond to them in the moment. You kind of just have to hear them out through the whole time, right? And then they could just delete the comments, they can ignore everything, and really it's just you left with their thoughts.
yeah,
Versus in the classroom, you're debating back and forth. right? So I remember walking away frustrated because it was like I didn't do anything wrong. But the uniqueness of comedians is the fact that they get to take something like that on a debate platform and they can share it in a story that's humorous, where both parties kind of have to sit back and you don't get to respond immediately, unlike a debate where you're trying to predict what the next person is going to say, and you kind of just sit back and you have to hear it out. And so I think that's where, you know, that's one of the ways that I've noticed that comedians can kind of leverage their skills in the world,
Yeah.
in these topics, and implement it on a platform that it's kind of hard not to hear them. Whether you agree with him or not, you have to wrestle with the question of, okay, then what's fair for the guy? If this is what's fair for the woman, right? If there's implications of this, then what's the implication of that? And anyways, I thought it was brilliant how Dave Chappelle said it, but also just recognizing that there's certain topics that might be better communicated from that platform than communicated in the debate platform.
I'm sorry, could you say that last part again?
Yeah, I was just saying that there's certain topics that are better delivered, at least in my opinion. I feel like they're better delivered from a comedian than they are from non, right? It's if you're a parent, there's some messages that are better for the kids to hear from the dad than it is for the mom, right? It's there's something about when your mom tells you she's proud of you, you expect that from moms. You just do. You know, you're like, you're my mom, you're going to support me. When you hear I'm proud of you from your dad, that hits different. It just hits different for some reason. But yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. First of all, I think that um, I think it's um, I don't know how the whole situation went, but I think I don't know, and I don't know if your teacher congratulated you, but they should have congratulated you. And the whole point of a debate is to debate. It's combat, right? But it's combat of ideas,
Yeah.
and you're not necessarily supposed to be nice. You're not supposed to, there's a certain aggression that comes with that. That should be perfectly fine. But yeah, I think that there are certain things that are best delivered by comedians, certain truths that are
Mhm.
best delivered by comedians, because it turns the whole. They have a way of turning things on their head. A good friend of mine, Evan Wilson, will say that. He says that I think well, he uses this idea of things being turned on their head, and I like that. And I think comedians turn things on their head, and all of a sudden we're seeing it from a whole different bloody angle. And
Yeah.
um, so it's good to have, but it's good for people to have a sense of humor too in their own lives, so they can do this for themselves. And you're right. I mean, there's a huge difference between your mother telling you she's proud of you and your father
Yeah.
telling you he's proud of you. Huge difference. Mother telling you she's proud of you is like, okay, cool. That's what's for dinner.
Yeah.
But when your pops tells you he's proud of you, that comes with a weight, you know. And you because because his attention is greater than the attention of your mother.
Mm.
The compliments of the father, especially to the son, is far greater than the compliments. But it depends. It depends on what kind of father you are. If you're the kind of father, for example, who saturates the life of every child with compliments and nonsense,
Yeah.
nonsense good jobs, then at the end of the day, your compliments aren't going to mean jack shit because you say it all the time when it's deserved and when it's not deserved. But if you're a kind of father, and this is natural, whether we like it or not, this is natural, it is self-evident. When a father congratulates a son, a daughter even, it hits home, it hits deeper than when a mother does it. And it's a strange but beautiful phenomenon, you know?
Yeah. I was gonna ask you about that because we talked about water. I feel like there's a theme, like it's this watering down thing. Like I know for me growing up, like I don't know if I heard it very often that my mom was proud of me, like as far as from a verbal perspective. but I knew that she was proud of me from the level of freedom that she gave to me. Right? I could tell that like it's a weird understanding that her and I had where it's like I'll be gone all day, right? But I had other buddies that had to check in very frequently, but I never had to check in. Like I wake up in the morning on Saturday, disappear till lunch, disappear again till dinner. Was kind of what my days look like. And my mom didn't say it very often, but when she did, it had me in tears. Like it was just a physical response. Like it had me in tears. I'm raising my daughter right now, and I am so amazed at her progression. And I'm specifically talking to my oldest daughter. Um, my oldest is 4, my youngest is 1, right? So it's my 4-year-old is the one that I'm communicating with often as far as verbally, right? And I'm seeing her doing things. And there's a part of me that wants to compliment everything I see because I'm somewhere in between. I'm genuinely amazed, right? And also, I just don't want her to ever think that I'm not on her side. You know what I mean? Like it's this weird, like I didn't hear it very often, so I feel like there's a part of me that's overcompensating, maybe trying to do that. But the other thing also is like I've just been told that when you have daughters, you just have to engage them differently. And I don't know. And I trust people that have raised daughters. I try to trust the people above me, but it's like I don't know if that's actually true or not. But I guess what would you say to what are your thoughts on what does a healthy balance look like as
Like,
far as like complimenting your kids? Like I look at my daughter and she'll do things all the time that I've never seen before. And there's a part of me that wants to say, that's beautiful. You're doing a great job. Right. Or she'll even come up to me. She'll be like, look, Dad, look what I did. Right. She's like, high five. And I'm like, I give her that high five. You know what I mean? Because like it'd be weird to deny her. Is that what you're talking about? Or is there something else different that you're saying when you're saying over
you know,
complimenting?
it depends because one of the things about raising kids is that it's really one giving advice on raising children. It's like giving advice on how to make like the perfect apple pie, right? It's like shut the fuck up. Everybody can make apple pie. The question now becomes, yeah, you have your own little secrets, your own little additions here and there, but apple pie is apple bloody pie. The question is does the apple pie taste good at the end of the day? I
Mm,
think that, it's, I always tell my wife this, like, I'm not, um, I'm Kenny Noli raising children. I have no particular expectations, at least I have personal expectations, but I don't have this dadness that says, oh, because I'm a dad, I must do this or be like this. It's just Kenny Noli in the hands of God raising children. That's it, right? So it all depends. Like I don't know that there's a particular way. I think that everybody will, by their own little strange flavors and personalities and thoughts, raise their kid a certain type of way, and then you just got to see if it pans out or not. But to answer the question as best as I can, I would say that for me, um, most of my interaction with my kids, it's not it's not complimentary. I don't compliment my kids. In fact, I ignore them when they do good. I don't look at them. If they do something good, I say nothing. I behave as though I didn't see it, right? Because why should they do good so I compliment them? What does that mean? If they grow up and go out into the world and live in their lives, I expect them to do good for good sake, hell, for their own sake, not
mm,
because they're gonna get a pat on the back or anything like that. But every now and then, they do something that I count, from my own perspective, to be exceptional, right? And because it's exceptional, I want to let them know that this particular thing is exceptional. Then I compliment them and I talk to them about it. But most of the time, I ignore my children when it comes to good. I don't, I'm attentive when they do bad. But when they do good, That's what they should be doing. What's what's to congratulate? But when they go above and beyond and do something that expresses or that shows a certain amount of, strength, thought, stick-to-itiveness,
Yeah.
badassery. Like my son a couple of weeks ago, we're at a park and he says, "Hey, Dad, look what I can do!" And he jumps off the slide. And I say to him, and I said, "Listen, dude, um, don't don't waste my time with this shit. Like,
Mm.
don't show me things that anybody and their monkey could do. Like your grandma could do that. You know what I mean? Your grandmother could do that. I don't care. Like, if you want to show me something cool. And the definition of cool in my household is making something difficult look easy.
Mm.
So when you
Can you
become
elaborate
good
on
at,
that more?
talk to me.
Elaborate on that more. I have more questions, but
So
give an example of that.
making something good look easy. So for example, skateboarding, right? It's pretty difficult to become a really good skateboarder, right? But when a skateboarder can perform those tricks with ease, and you're like, "Oh man, I can do that."
Yeah,
No, you can't. No, the fuck you can't. Just because
that's a
he
good
makes it
point.
look easy doesn't mean it's easy. But that's cool. We like that, right? When
Mm.
someone is so good at something, they make it look easy. Like, like somebody who can, well, as they're speaking, and they have very good recall. And so they're bringing out quotes or poems and it's flowing. You don't know how long they took to memorize those bloody things.
That's true. That's true.
And that's difficult, but they
Especially
make it
when
look
people like
easy. Now,
recite, when people
yeah,
recite like poems or they'll quote something and you're like, dude, that's like 7, 8, 9 sentences right there. That's insane that you have that in your head. You're right. I get what you're saying. So let me ask you a question on that. So essentially what you're hitting on is this I feel like when I say we, I'm just generally just talking about what's out there, it feels like, is that, hey, when you see your kid do something good, acknowledge it, right? Because then it's that what's it called? Continuous reinforcement, something like that, right? If you just keep complimenting them when they're doing good, they're gonna keep doing that behavior. And it sounds like you're saying that's actually a problem. Can you hit
I
on
think
why you
that's a
think that's a
horrible
problem
thing.
again? Yeah, can you elaborate on that a little more? I think you
Yeah,
brushed past
because
it.
the kid is not doing the kid did the first good thing for one of two reasons. Either because it came naturally to them to do it, right? Or you have taught them to do it, right? Okay. What happens when you compliment and when you clap for them is what happens in school. We usually go to school. We're supposed to go to school to get an education. And education is not the same thing as A, B's, and C's. You have a lot of students in schools going through school because they want A's and they want B's, right? And it's like, okay, but did you learn a damn thing? Or are you just pushing the right buttons so you can get the right response, which is the A? Congratulations, you're a monkey, right? There's a peanut somewhere, you push the red button, and the peanut comes out, and you eat the peanut and you push the button again. You're not learning a damn thing. You're just a monkey who is doing the right thing for rewards, right?
Yeah.
However, what we want as parents often is that our children do the good for the sake of the good. And so I don't compliment them when they do good because they should be fucking doing good. They shouldn't. So and I see this a lot with Christian kids and they freak me the hell out. It's like very little creepy little lambs. They come out, especially girls, because they always want to impress and they have this desire to impress. They have this desire to be liked. They have this desire to be loved and to be adored and admired. And they come out and they say, you know, um, hi, Mr. Smith. I've been, I've been reading my Bible. Isn't that lovely? Like, oh yes, that's really nice. You should be doing that. Like, shut the fuck up. No, no, no. Oh, look at me. I'm helping my sister. I'm helping my sister up the ramp. Aren't I just the sweetest little girl? Oh, you sure are. No, you're not. You're a horrible little child. You're horrible. The point is simply that when we give them the compliments, the claps, the accolades for the good, we turn them into people who do good for the sake of praise. At least
Mm.
we run the risk of doing that, right? And
There's a verse about that somewhere.
well, I suspect that something along the lines of, you know, whatever you do, you know,
Somewhere, it's the one
do
that
it for
talks
God,
about
not
like,
for man.
yeah, yeah, that do it for the approval of man. Yeah, no, I got you. I was just adding a little humor in there, but um, so I remember, I don't know who I heard this from. I want to say it was you, maybe not. And it could have been another a mentor of mine, but he talked about. I remember I was with fatherhood. Dude, I feel like the pressures of being a father has more to do with this outside pressure that's placed on me that I feel like it's there somehow than it is of like an inward pressure that I placed on myself. And so, I remember I was talking to I don't think it was you. It might have been you, but I remember I was talking to somebody and they said to me, they said, Josh, it's like, you got to be the father the way that God made you. Like, you just got to be yourself. Right. And this idea is that, like, stop trying to, like, it's okay to, like, talk to people here and there. And, if you have some questions, ask. But he's like, but you got to trust that God has made you in a certain way to raise your kids in a certain way. And you got to stick to that. And what's really interesting is, like, the more everybody keeps looking outside themselves, the more you realize that the answer isn't out there. You know what I'm saying? Like, if everybody is trying to read the books, if everybody is trying to listen to the podcast, everybody's trying to, the irony, right? We're talking about it in this podcast. But if everybody is talking about these things, right? And everybody's trying to figure out what's the right way to do it, well, if everybody's looking out and no one's really finding it, then the question gets raised, which is, okay, is there something that I need to start looking that's inward, right? There's ways that I want to raise my daughters that is counter to the way that I've seen a lot of people handle things, right? If you're not careful, you're gonna go, whether you're gonna talk to a family counselor or you're gonna talk to someone, they're gonna tell you every time you see this, then you got to make it known to your kids because your kids are just going to repeat what they see as being celebrated, right? And then it's like, yeah, but if you keep doing that over and over, at some point your kids are gonna grow up and they're only gonna do things for what they're gonna get in return, right? It's not about an inward transformation, right? But it's this way of moving in the world where you start to live for everybody else except for yourself. You're not even yourself in that moment, right? And if everybody is that way, then you start to create all these childrens that all look the same. And I know you and I have talked about certain places that you and I both have lived at where we would say that there's no difference between half of these kids. And that kind of is concerning. At some level, it's concerning. In other areas, it has its advantages, right? Intellectually, it has its advantages, but socially, it can have its disadvantages. So it's almost like what is the thing that Thomas Sowell says, right? Everything's an exchange. So if you're going to seek the world and trying to figure out what is like a parent, make sure you count the cost of what are you exchanging, right? What are you doing? But if you're also going to be the person that's like, I'm going to take my kids and I'm going to raise them a certain way, right? Then there might be some lessons that you could have learned if you listened to the people outside and just know that you're probably going to make that same mistake again. But at least you're going down that path. You're the one that's in control of this. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. I don't think. I think that I think it's important for every man and woman to be just decent human beings. Like, just be a fucking decent, responsible human being. First of all, like, and then trust yourself, trust your instincts, and trust, trust they're the wind that lives within. There is a problem when people, I mean, you have people who go to the pastors almost every day, or people who go to therapy almost every week, or people who read books, countless books about raising kids. And you have, there's like so many different philosophies out there, and you try to mold yourself into this weird cookie cutter shape, right? So that because we're all terrified our kids are going to be fucked up, right? And so we're trying and it comes from a good place. We're trying our best to save them. We're trying our best to make sure they're okay, right? But the question now becomes, who are you? Who are you? Are you a good man? Do you keep your word? Are you trustworthy? Do you steal? Do you lie? Do you cheat other people? Like, who are you? If you can answer that question, and you can answer it honestly, I would say you're already light years ahead of the average Joe, right? Um, I think that raising kids is pretty darn simple. Now, obviously, this is coming from somebody who in 5 years, uh, you know, 5 years from now, will come back and say, um,
Yeah,
God forbid.
yeah.
But the idea is that, I think parenting should be tailored to the individuals, to the family, based on the parents and based on the child you have, right? And the vision of where you want your family to go and what you want your family to be. It takes a lot of thinking. It takes a lot of correction. It takes a lot of paying attention. It takes a lot of time. But
Why do you
I
think
don't
that
think.
is? Why do you
Talk
think
to
it
me.
is that we? Why do you think it is that we are at that point? Because the default isn't that. The default is we just lean to mentors. We're leaning towards books. We're leaning towards podcasts. We're leaning towards whatever we've been taught. That's now the default, and it's rare when you see people say no to all that. I'm going to do it this way. What point do you think that shifted, and what
I
caused
think
that
that
shift?
people don't know themselves. They don't know themselves. Um, People don't have anything to stand on. A lot of us, especially in the West, don't have much to stand on. Our our philosophies, a lot of it is, first of all, incoherence. We plant ourselves, as this lunatic man used to say, we plant ourselves in midair. The
Hmm.
idea is that because we don't know ourselves, we don't trust ourselves, we don't think, we don't know our ass from a hole in the ground.
Hmm.
We rely on other people heavily. We rely on people who are experts heavily. There's nothing wrong with seeking the advice of an expert. There's nothing wrong with it. The problem becomes when that expert's word becomes law. When
Hmm.
you trust that expert more than you trust your
Yep.
own goddamn common sense. You know what I mean? The expert says, well, yeah, just like um don't let just let the kid run wild. Just let them do their thing, man. Like they're kids. They gotta be free, man, The kid like, slaps you across the face. It's okay. They're just expressing. They feel free enough to slap you because they love you, like that's why it's cool, So when a kid
Hmm.
slaps you across the face, it means they love you. It means they feel free to hurt you. Yeah. It's like, what the fuck are
Yeah.
you talking about? My kid
Yeah.
slaps me across the face. My God. My God.
You don't gotta elaborate, Kenny. You don't gotta elaborate. You can,
Sweet
we get it.
Lord.
We get it. We get it. We get it. I'm just gonna save this to listeners, and we'll just say we get it, man. We get it. Um, that's funny though, man. Do you think that there's an aspect of this that's it's easy? Do you think it's at least I can say that I'm only doing this because that's what I was advised to do. Almost like a shifting a blame. Like if this doesn't work out, at least I can be like, well, the pastor told me to read this book and I followed step by step. And look how my kid turned out. That's not on me. I trusted X. I trusted Y over here, right? Versus if you don't follow those footsteps, right, then you're kind of taking sole responsibility and you have nothing to. Why do you think it's easier for us? If you agree with that, why do you think is that just human nature to want to? not take responsibility and not to take ownership, that we'd rather
I,
just.
I, I would say that's definitely part of it. So a friend of mine would say, he said, one of the reasons people like making rules, it's because the rule
Yep.
draws a very straight line. It's me, the thing I want to do, and the rule, right? It's a very straight line, and it's the easiest way to try to basically accomplish what I want to accomplish. However, what people don't know is that rules are very interesting things. So wherever there is a rule, it means that somebody fucked up, right? So
Yep.
the rule is not freedom. The rule is actually a a mechanism there to either restrict or guide freedom, right? It's not freedom. Rules are actually they constrain you, they chain you up, they're helpful. For example, society has rules. Well,
Hmm.
society has rules because it's how society functions. However, the individual in his own life, when he lives by the rules of others, creates a problem for himself. I think that people don't there is an aspect that people want something, they want someone to blame. There is an aspect where people they don't think they can do it. They're scared. They don't think it's in them. They didn't have good parents. I'm not one, I don't like looking back at, like, saying, my father is a great man. My father is, I would not be who I am today without my father. Period. And I'm grateful to him. My father was not a perfect man. Looking back, I have seen the mistakes he's made. I do not blame him for any decision I've made at all, and I will never do that. But when I look back, I can understand certain things about myself and my life. When you have bad parents, my father wasn't a bad parent. I think my father was a great parent. He wasn't there all the time, but when he was there, I felt his gravity. When you have bad parents, you think often, not all the time, especially if you haven't forgiven them for their folly, you think that a lot of people they think that they cannot do any better because they don't know any better. And that's not particularly true. I think that some people are scared. I think some people they want someone to blame. I think that some people don't want to do the hard work of thinking, studying, or even just trusting your own instincts. Now, here's what I say about instincts. Instincts can only be trusted when you yourself are trustworthy. Period. If you're not a
Can you say that again?
trustworthy person,
Say that again.
don't.
Say that again.
So what do you say?
Can you say that again?
Instincts can only be trusted when you yourself are a trustworthy individual. So strive to be a trustworthy individual, then trust yourself. Because it's like, there's a reason for the Christian, there's a reason God says, I have given you my spirit. Listen to it. And for the
Yeah.
non-Christian, for the secularist, they have instincts. We all have instincts. We have parental instincts. You know what I mean? And I think that I think there's a whole mess of reasons why we run to the gurus, why we run to the pastors, why we run to the psychologists, why we run to the self-help books. And I think that those things can be helpful. It's kind of, like when you're cooking, my wife and I would cook a lot together. And we don't use recipes. However, every now and then, for something we don't know what the basis is, what the base for the thing is, we use a recipe, right? But the recipe is the foundation. We don't stick to the recipe strictly. It's like, fuck that, who cares? But okay, but now that we have the recipe, like, okay, cool, I never thought of that. I didn't see that. Oh, that's nice. Let's do that. Then we can add our own flavors, right?
Hmm. Yeah,
And I think
well
it's kind
said.
of
Yeah.
like that for people who don't know what they're particularly doing. The foundation can be set by the pastor, by the guru, by the psychologists, by the self-helps, but don't sit there. Use that as a foundation and then build upon it for yourself, because it's very important that you build for yourself rather than having your home built for you. You know what I mean?
It keeps my mind keeps going back and forth. Keeps looping back to this idea of it's just easier to shift responsibility. It's easier to just lean on somebody else. It's easier, you know what I mean? It just feels, and here's the other thing. The other thing also wants you to lean on them, right? So if you think about like pastors and stuff, right? It's like in one sense you have pastors that'll say, hey, you need to go and discover this on your own, right? But then it's like you see the way that the church is set up, and you're like, I hear what you're saying, but the way this is set up, it causes me to lean towards you more and more, right? There's always one more class you got to attend. There's one more Bible study you need to do, right? There's always more small groups to be a part of. And before you know it, you get caught up in my my life is already revolving around the church in every capacity, right? And it's like it's hard to eject out of that to discover who you are and what God wants you to be and where your family is headed towards, right? Because if you pull away slightly, what ends up happening is then again we're using the church for example. It's like I was in ministry for a while, so I one of the problems that people run into is like your personal life is so integrated with the church that to step away, it's almost like everybody suddenly notices you're not around as much. And so they just assume things must not be going well, right? And so everybody structures the world around this. But when you look at, for Christians specifically, when you look at what Jesus said, right? He says, I've come to give life and life to the fullest, right? Or when he talks about to the Pharisees, where he's like, you Pharisees, you look into the law thinking that there's life in it, right? But it's like, no, life is looking in front of you. You can't even recognize it because you're so in over here. And I think there's a fear, and I know I'm kind of jumping around, but it's like, I think there's a fear with parenting that if I trust myself, if I trust that I can do this, again, with the basic foundation, right? Like if you got kids, right? And it's like, it's important to know if your spouse or if the mother is not breastfeeding, to know that there's resources out where you can go and get milk and things like that. Like those are some foundational things that help you be a bit better parent. But beyond that, there is a fear of, if I say no to a lot of these things, I'm actually going to have to figure this out. That seems daunting. Being a parent in itself is already daunting. And I think there's a fear that I'm going to lose myself if, and here's the thing, the losing myself, it might be, this is terrible example, but it's kind of like that woman that's in an abusive relationship, right? It's like there's the unknown is more terrifying than this physical abuse they're in, because at least they know this. They know this, they've lived in it long enough, they know they can survive, or at least for a duration of time, right? But on the other side, everybody else is trying to point them towards like, dude, there's life over here. Like, but it's like saying no to that can be challenging. I think that happens with parenting. I think at some level I feel it where it's like I'm looking around and I'm like, okay, well, what do I want to do with the kids today? What do I want to teach them today? Right. And it's like, well, I could be teaching them ABC, but then there's a part of me that's like, but I also want them to go and explore nature. So maybe I should take them on a walk today and I should let them play around in the park, right? Or I started going to the same McDonald's because my daughter ends up befriending a little boy, right? And it's like there's a lot of things I want to do. There's other things we could be doing on that day, but I'm realizing that like there's she's really enjoying this. Like she's actually like connecting with this boy. And I'm looking around and first thought in my head is like, okay, we're always going to McDonald's every week. Is that good for their diet? Right? It's like you just start taking yourself on this journey. And you're like, it isn't about that. Like there's more important things to being a parent than just strictly focusing on, that might be a terrible example, but anyways, I guess back to I think there's a fear of if I'm left to myself that I might lose myself. And in the process of losing myself, I don't want to turn the kids into something that I may not know how it will turn out. But the
Yeah,
silliness in all of it is the reason that there's more books being published every single day about parenting is because more and more people become insecure about the way that they parent. But the way that they parent has been by the way that they've been taught by the people around them. So in a weird sense, to do it by yourself might be a better path
yeah, but
because you know that
you
the
have
other path isn't good.
no, but you have. That's the thing about honesty, right? So, um, you have to be honest. You have to be you have to be honest. There's something about we have a generation that really we like new things. We hate traditional things. We hate looking like our parents a lot of the time, or this archaic, like a lot of us judge ourselves, our lives, right and wrong based on Hollywood. What Hollywood says is right and wrong. Excuse me. What the stars say is right and wrong, right? And we've never actually asked ourselves, like, okay, let's really look at the way like the traditional ways our parents and their parents raised them, and let's look at the way the world is going today, and we can say, okay, let's honestly say, what good can we pull from back then, and is there any good that we can pull from today?
Yeah, yeah,
There, a lot of the time we're so imbalanced in ourselves. We hate so much, and because we hate, we're blinded. There are some people that raise their kids in a certain way, not because they believe is the best way, out of the honesty of what they've
yeah.
discovered, but they
It's
believe
out of
is the best way
response.
because they hate something
Yep,
else.
yep,
That
yep.
makes no sense. It makes
Yeah.
no sense. It's
What
like
was it
there's
they
certain
say
things.
to
Talk to me.
they talk about this from the inner cities. They talk about how like why there's a cycle that happens, right? It's like you have a father, right? Something happens in the system, the father gets locked up. The son rises up, right? And just becomes this child that's like, I'm not going to be like my father. But all they think about is how they're not going to be like this. And then the cycle keeps continuing, right? It's what's driving them. And in psychology, they talk about this like what you put your mind to, even if that mind is, I don't want to be something, you're going to find yourself going down that path because
Yeah,
that's all that your mind thinks about. Yeah.
there are two. There are two types. There are two things we become more like. We become more like that which we hate, and we become like that which we admire. So I don't like I don't like hatred as a concept, and I don't like it in my own heart. I don't like it when I see it in others, but it's not my business what other people do. I prefer to admire things. When you admire something, when you truly admire it, you become more like it. And if you admire something good, you draw nearer to it. If you admire something wicked, you draw nearer to that. If you hate something good, it's not the good you get like. It's you get like the thing that hates the good to the utmost degree, which is something bad,
Hmm.
which is strange. Hatred has no function. I think that I think that if the kids in the inner cities or so forth or whatever, doesn't matter who you are,
Yeah.
if you
Yeah.
learn to admire, like one of the greatest things about life today is that there's so many biographies out there.
Dude.
There's so
Yeah.
many people you can, like in history, that you can read about and you can be inspired by, you can admire them. and you will find the encouragement. I don't like David Goggins very much. Jesus, what a smoking pile of cunts. But I think that there's something admirable about him.
Mm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I
it's
don't,
go
I
ahead.
don't, I don't think he talks about motivation, for example, and he tells people, you're a piece of shit or whatever the hell. That's you got to get out of bed and do this and do that.
Yeah.
And what he fails to see, or maybe he does see it, I don't know. I've just never seen it. I've only seen clips of him and these things that he says, for example. But there's something he admires. There's a vision of himself that he admires, and that draws him towards that. He doesn't want to be this other thing, but he admires the good thing more than he despises the other thing, and it pushes him. There, I think that, yeah, I think if we admire the right thing, we draw nearer to that thing. It's a very strange metaphysical
Well, there's this
experience.
saying, right? If you have two wolves, right, and both of them are chained up, one is sitting in the dark and one is sitting in the light, right? Which one's going to survive? And the answer is whichever one you feed. Right? Whichever wolf that you choose to feed is going to be the one that
Yeah.
thrives, is going to be the one that survives. I remember Charles Barkley talks about this. He talked about in his days when he would go to different schools and he would say, like, he'll go in certain areas and he was talking about the inner city versus like the suburbs, and he would ask the question of, what do you guys want to be? Right. And he said when he's in the inner city, right, is people they admire rappers, they admire athletes, right? And that's the kind of people that get lifted up. And then he talks about how you go to the suburbs, like, who do you guys, right? And he talks about this, and the kids respond in ways like they want to be like engineers, they want to be doctors, they want to be like there's a different emphasis, there's a different admiration. And so it's interesting you talk about how you hate versus what you admire, right? And if what you admire is to be an athlete, you are now trying to be in a statistics that so little amount of people get into, right? You're setting yourself up for a very difficult life, right? Unless you're LeBron James, right? But then over here, it's like if you want to be an engineer, you want to be a doctor, it's not easy to get in those, but a lot more people can be in those professions, right? And there's always going to be room for more and more doctors, right? You can travel across the different countries and people would hire you if you're a doctor or an engineer. The so, but yeah, back to the two wolves, right? Which one lives? It's at the end of the day, whichever one you choose to feed is going to be the one that survives.
Boom. I think that's a very lovely example.
You know what I mean? And so, um, I'm trying to think of myself as a parent. Like one of the, so it's interesting. Like the more I look at the way that my mom did things, the more I'm like, and it's weird. Maybe you said this about your father. That was interesting. You said, though my father was absent at times, but when he was there, you felt it.
Yeah.
With me, I feel similar. In my way, with my mom, it's more of like I didn't hear a lot of things that were nurturing. But when I look at all my basic needs, when I look at, I'm like, dude, she knocked it out the park, man. And like the more I look into her life, the more I'm just amazed at how she did what she did. And there's certain values that she lived by that she never had to say. But the more I'm a father, the more I see those things being as strong as they are. I'm like, wow, that's a good rule. That's a really, really good rule. Um, a silly example, but it was very powerful in our household. My mom had a rule which was we really had two rules in our house, and other than that, I think there really wasn't rules in our house. Right? I'm gonna tell you two serious one, and I'll tell you one joking one. Number one rule, what I felt like growing up was like my mom never wanted to hear our name spoke negatively outside our home. That was a very like clear rule, right? And I think I grew up not wanting to disappoint my mom, but I think being around a lot of mentors helped me understand that. I shouldn't just be good for the sake of impressing my mom, but I should be good because this is going to be better for me and it's going to be better for everybody around me, right? So that was she didn't want our name spoken negatively was a pretty big rule. And then the other thing she taught us was just like we were kind of taught to not disrespect our elders, right? It's just like it was a very simple rule, right? And I don't know where I walked away from this because I'm sure my brothers will have different, but I just knew that it would hurt my mom significantly if I disrespected an elder. Like my mom's 80 years old because I was adopted, right? So it's like she's also to a lot of people she'll be elder, and she's 80 now. But there was a certain sense of respect that I had to have for people older than me, right? And so, but the other rule that kind of guided our house was that if we wanted to play video games, 1 hour sorry, 1 hour reading equals 2 hours video game, and we weren't allowed to watch TV until after 5 p.m. Right? And if I was 8 years old, I had to be in bed by 8. If I was in if I was in eighth grade, I was in bed by 8. If I was in ninth grade, I was in bed by 9, unless I had sports or something. And then by the time I got to junior year, she didn't care what time because she just ingrained these things in us for so long that I knew that I probably should go home because it's getting late. You know what I mean? Like it's I started making those decisions.
Yeah,
But she raised us in a way that my mom never had to call me to ask where I was. My mom never was concerned when I was out where I was. I don't get how she, with those rules kind of being the only thing, I don't know how she was able to instill those things in me, but I'm trying to figure out that with my kids. I'm like, how did she do that? Because I've never read a book that's talked about the things that she's been able to do, right? There's not a mentor that I've talked with that's even slightly giving me insight to play that. And when I talk to my mom, she does not she does not want praise for it. She doesn't want, she doesn't want to be recognized for it. And when I talk to her about it, it's almost like she couldn't even write a blueprint if she wanted. You know what I mean? It's like she just operated in a certain way that it simply is just, I don't think it's replicatable. And I think that's where the uniqueness of each of us being a parent is rather than trying to create something that's replicatable, rather just be yourself, trust in yourself, walk in your path. Don't worry about if other people can replicate this or not. You know what I mean?
yeah, I do.
And
I
so
do.
and it's like I've almost started to throw a white flag that I won't be able to parent like my mom. And that's okay. But there
No,
are, like I said, there are a couple
no, please go on.
there are things like you said, look back in the past and try to grab certain things that she did. Like I love the books, I like the elderly rules stuff. But if I just stuck to those, I promise you my kids are gonna be in a different mess. You know what I mean? It just doesn't work like that. But there are things about who my mom is that she is true to herself, right? You talked about are you a trustworthy person? My mom was a very trustworthy person. I'm talking about like my mom at one point, she grounded me for 6 weeks. We had on the calendar 6 weeks circled. And let me tell you, there's nothing. I don't know how many birthday parties I missed out on. I don't know how many, all these events. It didn't matter, man. My mom, when she said that's what it was, that's the way that it is. So I wonder if part of being a parent, kind of like you're talking through, is that recognition that you're not going to be like anybody else around you, and that's okay.
Yeah, you're most likely not. I, I,
Hmm.
I cannot be my father. I cannot be my father. My father's influence in me has made me who I am, but I cannot be my father. We to say no, but everything he's done for me has shaped me to be whatever the hell I need to be for my son. Plus other things. It's my life experiences. There's the things that I admire, the books I read. There's my vision for him and where I want us to be in the next God knows how many years and so forth, by His grace. But you
Hmm.
cannot be your parents. And my I I believe more in the spirit of the thing than the law of the thing.
Mm.
Um,
Yep.
and so And I know when this happens, there's a way in which I stand, there's a way in which I speak that is very much like my father. Absolutely. And it's like the spirit of my father, the spirit of whatever he was to me. I have that. There's a spirit of that I understand, you know, and I think that's, and that some of it can be instinct, some of it can be, you know, things you've learned, and some of it can be, uh, you know, um, habits. So, but yeah, I don't think that you can be your parents. You cannot replicate it. You may look like somebody else, but you are not that person. And so I think that this is why it's important. Parents need to be trustworthy themselves in every aspect of their life, trustworthy, at least aspiring to be, and then trust the instincts that you have naturally. Here's why it's very important to say that, because there are parents who have terrible instincts because they're horrible people. There are parents
Mm.
whose instinct is to do terrible things to their children. It just is because they're horrible people. And so the question you must ask yourself, who are you? Know thyself. Are you trustworthy? Do you love goodness, beauty? And do you want to understand your children? They are 1,001 questions that you can answer that you
Yeah.
haven't even given one thought to, you know? And so, but if you can figure it out, and if you can figure it out and you can walk in the light, then trust yourself. If you can't, oh boy, that's a
Don't
different
trust.
story
Yeah.
now.
There's a. I don't know if this story is actually a true story, but I remember hearing it like I would say probably almost 10 years ago. And I was with a few of my buddies, and we were watching this video where this guy was talking about how he went. Again, I don't know if this is a true story, right? Because people just like to tell stories, but I think the message lands pretty well. But there's this man that was known as like one of the most like giving man. Like he was something about it was really easy for him to give. Like he would just give food all the time from his cabinetry. And so these people came to hear him speak because he was doing a talk, right? And so people show up, there's pamphlets everywhere. And essentially, the idea of this conference is how to be a giver, right? How do you give? Right? How do you make it so easy to give to those less fortunate?
That's
And
incredibly stupid.
yeah, but so the guy's on stage and people are listening to him. And he said, well, here's how to do it. And it's like, so what I first do is when I enter my house is I go to my cabinets. When I get to my cabinet, I see the food there. I grab a bunch of them and I put them in a bag. And then I take that bag and I find that person that can use it and I give it to them. Right? It's like it really is just as simple as that, right? It's like all these people are thinking like, oh my gosh, like this guy must have the gift of God to be able to do. But the guy recognizes that what he's doing is it's not a very challenging thing to do in the sense of the ability to do it. Like now, the desire to go and do it, that's a different conversation. But how does one become a giver is pretty straightforward. You find that thing and you give it to somebody. And yeah, so I don't know. That story has always stuck with me as like,
I think
how
it's
do
a
you
good story.
be,
It
you know,
illustrates the stupidity of people, which people are very stupid. It also illustrates how, you know, you see it all the time, but this is a real thing. It's a real thing because you hear, you know, there's conferences about hearing from God. There's conferences about how to um, how to build relationships better. There's conferences about how to be a better
yeah,
whatever the fuck. Put a name on it, right?
yeah,
And it's, and you go there. Some of them are free. Some of them you have to pay. And for those who pay, what suckers? Oh my goodness! But they go there and then hear all these people come and talk to them about the thing they're there to listen to, and they all clap their fat little hands together, and then they go home, and nothing ever changes.
just changes. What was that? There was a book that you and I read. I remember we talked about it in college. I remember we talked about this, but we both kind of walked away thinking like, what is the purpose of this book? I wish I could think of it. But it's
Oh,
kind of like that where I
I
don't know
think
what
it's
it is.
if I remember the book, I remember a book that we read many years ago. It was with this guy, Love Wins, Bob something. Is it Love
It
Wins?
wasn't. I don't know. I know that one. That's the one with Rob Bell. That's what that was. That's not who
Rob
I'm
Bell,
thinking
yeah,
of.
yeah.
But I know what I'm talking about. But it's there's this like I wish I could think of it, man. I really wish. Oh well. But I, I guess the problem that not the problem, but I guess one of the challenges of again just kind of getting back to the parenting thing, but it sounds like there's a sense, there's a pull that each of us feel that we think that the people around us have the answer. But in all reality, when you sit down, like you ever had like conversation you had with like I don't know if you, I mean, you and I have had this, right? Where it's like we've sat down and we've had a real conversation, which I think we most of the time do. But it's like you quickly realize it's like, oh, his life is just as messy as my life is. You know what I mean? It's just like, oh, you struggle with the same thing I struggle with, just looks slightly different, and you're trying to figure it out, right? And the wisest people that you and I know are not people that act like those things are not there, but they're people that recognize them for what they are, right? And they've learned to accept their flaws, right? And maybe try to make decisions where they can. But there's a sense of peace that they've come with how they live their life. And they're okay with not fitting in a certain box. And those are the people that no matter what kind of human being you are, you can tell that person from a crowd of people. You can tell that person that has peace, whether you're religious or not, has nothing to do with that. But there are certain types of people you come across and you look at them and you say, there's something different about you, right? And no matter what theology, no matter what information somebody presents to you, you look at that person and say, whether you believe in God or not, it's not even important. What I can tell is you're a different person. And there's an aspect of us that looks at that person and says, how do I get into that situation? Not how do we become like that person, but how do I walk in a manner that has that sense of peace, right? Because we can all acquire peace. I think it's very possible for every individual to acquire peace within themselves. But we're just not going to look like that person.
No, there are three men that I admire very much, three men that have been very influential in my life. My father, a man named Edward Wilson, another man named Masaru Wilson Uwedi. They all look very fucking different. That's for damn sure.
Hmm.
They are not at all the same person. All three have what I would call an exceptional amount of peace and strength, and it all looks very different. Mr. Masaru is a very playful, very happy, very jovial, very smart, um,
He
very
has a way, if I could add to it, my conversations with him specifically, he has a way of like, when people say like, don't take yourself too seriously.
he does not know how to take himself seriously.
Dude, and it's just like you look at him and you're like, why you're making yourself seem so foolish? But it's like he's that kind. My interactions with him has been, you look at that person. I'm trying to think of like the movie character or something that's like him, but he strikes me as Boomy from Avatar, where it's like extremely playful but very powerful.
Yeah,
Like if there was Five Lotus, he would make that cut somehow.
yeah.
He'd be in there.
I,
That's what I see. Anyway, keep going.
I
I
I
think
would
Boomy.
definitely agree with that. He's an exceptional human being, as far as I can tell. Then there's
Yeah.
Evan Wilson, very serious, also very playful, but very serious.
Yeah.
This is a man who has thought through. This is a philosopher. Period.
Is it okay for us to give him the title Uncle Iroh? Maybe? Is he Uncle Iroh?
Absolutely, Uncle Iroh.
Yeah.
And then my
Avatar Last
father.
Airbender. We got this. He better fit in
then
the Five Lotus.
then my father's a very strong man. My father has what I call just common sense. My father does not sit around pondering life and its meaning. My father does not. He's a serious man. He's not very playful. Sometimes he's playful, but not really. But he is, and all these men look very different. You know what I mean? They have
He's got to be the
peace.
waterbender. I'm gonna have to give him that. He's got to be the Katara's teacher. That's who he's got to be.
Yeah, you know
Yeah,
what I mean. It's like there's
yes, bro.
no.
Yes, we're serious.
It doesn't look like we all wants to look. Um, I don't know. But I think you're right. Everyone can find peace in their life. Um, and when you when you find that peace, you're set. You don't care, or should I say, you start to care less and less what others think, what they're doing. You trust your own intuition, your own spirit, your own life, your own mind, more than you trust anyone or anyone else's or anything, any book, any philosophy, any idea. And I think that it's not just a very comforting thing. It's a very, I don't know how to explain it. It's solid rockness, solidity in a
Yeah,
world of paper, you know?
yeah.
It's absolute solidity.
I think our generation is very interesting because we have more resources than the generation before us, right?
Yeah,
I'm very, so it's right in front of us. Um, we also have a technology that allows us to communicate with anybody in the world, right? So I
yeah,
mean, you can back in the days, right? If I'm talking about back in the day, I'm talking about like Jesus' time, right? If you wanted to learn from some teacher, you had to travel from one country to the next to be able to under that person, right? You better hope that he's there on that Monday. You make that
yeah.
truck, you get there. You better hope he's not taking a vacation or something, right? So you have that. Those are things that I think about when I hear people traveling long distances for some objective. I just think, man, what if he shows up? I mean, we had a speaker that's supposed to be here that didn't make the call. You know, he's like, what would happen if we had to travel to Africa to connect with the
And it
person who
turns
couldn't
out he
make
was
it?
on
Anyway,
vacation.
but they make these. So we have resources like nobody else, and we have the ability to um, that our work we can do remotely, right? That's not for everybody, but a lot of people. You and I both have jobs that we can work from anywhere, and so we have more. In a way, I feel like we have more freedom, not just from a legal perspective, like, but I actually think that we have individual freedom like no
Yeah,
other before us. And there's a part of me that's like, I wonder if wisdom can enter into the because people always associated wisdom with white hair, older people, you have to have
yeah, yeah.
life. And it's like we have that ability, and I've told you this numerous times. I think you're a very wise man. And so there's this ability that the youth we can tap into those things that people would have to read libraries and libraries of of literature to be able to get some of the insights that you and I can pull up pretty quickly. And we could
But
even go.
here's the thing. Freedom to an immature mind is slavery. When a person is given freedom before they're ready for it, it is absolutely destructive. It is paralyzing. The mind has to be ready, and then freedom becomes appreciated. And it's not just appreciated, you thrive in it.
How
Our
does that happen?
generation sorry, say that again?
How does that how does the youth, the young, learn to appreciate wisdom?
Wisdom?
Or yeah, you were just talking about how like at first it has to be appreciated for it to I
Yeah,
forgot how
so
you worded it.
let me give you an example. I'll use the woods. Let's just say that I had a house in the woods, right? And I raised my children in this house in the woods. And since they were children, I taught them about the plants. I taught them about the, where to go, where not to go. I taught them about how to survive in the woods if they ever get lost. I taught them about how to, you know, um, how to follow the stars. I taught them how to live in the woods apart from myself, right? And I did not let them go out into the woods until they were mature enough to deal with that. And I said, okay, you're good to go. Get out of here. You're free, right? When my children go out into the woods, they will thrive. They will make mistakes, of course, but they will have a certain amount of maturity, knowledge, and understanding that will not only keep them alive, but they know that they can traverse, if not all, most of the challenges and difficulties they will encounter. Okay, let's say that I take the same house, same woods, and I give my son, when he's 3 years old, 5 years old, 7 years old, without that knowledge, without the maturity, without the wisdom, without the understanding, and I say, okay, kid, off you go, it's going to be a very fucking terrifying place. Every creaking, every branch that breaks, every berry that grows, every mudslide, every puddle is going to be a danger to him. Without knowledge, wisdom, and maturity, freedom is a burden. Freedom is a curse. Freedom is terrifying. And our generation has, no offense to anyone, actually no, all the offense to everyone, no wisdom, no knowledge, no understanding, no guidance, and then you give them the world. How the
There's a
fuck are they going to
yeah,
survive?
there's a book that I read that talks about rite passage. How like if you look at a lot of these historical society civilizations, you can call villages, all that. They have at a point where the boy becomes a man, the rite of passage,
Yeah,
right? When this happens, this he talks about how there's one where this tribe, I think it's a Native American tribe. What ends up happening is the young boy has to go out into like a certain area in the woods, right? So let's just say they truck out 5 miles, right? And he has to keep walking. He gets to a certain place and he has to sit down and he has to look forward. He can't look backwards at all, right? It's pitch black out there. He doesn't know what's behind him, but he has to sit there and look forward and he's not able to look back. And so, throughout the nights, he's hearing the howling sounds, he's hearing the footsteps, right? You might even see some eyes out in the bushes, right? And eventually the boy's going to get tired, right? And he's going to fall asleep out there, right? But again, he's got to keep looking forward. And when the sun rises is when the boy is able to turn around. And I think it's such a powerful image. So in the morning, the boy turns around, looks behind him, and notices that his father has been watching and protecting him the whole night, right? So it's just like this scary moment for the child, but he doesn't realize that the father is there the whole time taking care of him. But he's got to overcome this fear. He's got to overcome this fear of being out there. Now, you and I, and people that probably listen to this, we don't have to worry about darkness in the same way that people back then had to worry about darkness, right? You could go your whole life without stepping once in the woods, which is insane. That's a reality that we can be in. But so even when I hear you say what you're saying, it's like there is a balance of you got to let them experience the danger, but it sounds like what you're saying is, and probably it's true about the boy, is the boy probably spent a lot of times with his father in the woods. He has a good idea of what's going on. It's just there's that there's that moment where it's you're gonna pass it on. The son has to take it on so that one day the son could take his son, right? Or whatever, and he's taking them out there and they got to continue that cycle. Do you feel like, oh, I guess what I'm saying is, it sounds like that might be something that is incorporated with wisdom that's missing, where I was blessed enough to have mentors that kind of played that role for me. Like if I die, whenever I die, I'm probably gonna have 12 men that I'm gonna put in there that have really influenced my life, every stage of my life, and they know who they are. I've From my wedding days to my graduation, college, every stage, I've let them know how thankful I am, and I continue to let them know how thankful I am. But I didn't realize that there was moments of rite of passages that I partook in, like in Boy Scouts. There's a rite of passage when you become an Eagle Scout. They make it very, very clear you're no longer this, you are now this, right? Schools have it, right? It's like once you get to a certain grade level, you got that rite of passage. You are no longer a middle school, you're now a high schooler. You're no longer a high schooler. Do you feel like that is kind of, I mean, do you feel like, I guess, where's the rite of passage nowadays when it comes to wisdom? Is there a moment of passing on, or is it that rite of passage doesn't exist, so that's why you can't tell the difference between a man and a boy nowadays, right?
I
Because you
think
can
it's
have
a
a
I think it's a bloody good question. And the truth is that yeah, I don't know. I don't think there is culturally, and I don't know that there is. So, for example, the way I see it in the Hollywood portrayal of this in the coming of age story, it's usually booze and sex and troublemaking, and then somehow surviving it, and then the story of obviously has its own challenges, and then you kind of overcome those challenges, right? And but booze, sex, and troublemaking are not they're not wisdom, and but that's what the average American young person uh, sees as, now I'm a man. I can drink. I can have sex with whoever. I can drink whatever I want. Have sex with whoever I want. I can go out into town and cause a ruckus, and now I'm a man. And that's incredibly stupid. That's incredibly stupid. Because all those things are things that destroy a man. They do. And it's like our rite of passage, or if I'm right that this
yeah,
is the rite of passage, right? It's a very dangerous thing. It's not just, forget about the dangers. It's completely stupid.
yeah,
So, for example, what I plan on doing with my son and my daughter at some point, I have a plan for them. I'm not going to say it here because I think it's a waste of time. But I have a plan for them. At a certain point, and I'm waiting for something. There's something I'm looking for, both in my daughter and in my son. And when that thing is accomplished in them, I'll let them know that this is time. You're a
yeah,
man now. You know what I mean?
yeah,
And
yeah,
it has, and there's a very high standard that I'm setting for them, not because not because it has to be high, and not because I'm trying to make life difficult for them particularly. It's because the world is changing rapidly, and things are becoming a bit more muddied than our generation.
yep,
But I think it is important to have that kind of rite of passage. I think it is important to have that kind of wisdom is not transferable. My son, just because, as you, though
yeah,
I would
yeah,
not claim this, there is a certain amount of wisdom that comes naturally to me. It's not that
yeah,
I'm particularly special, but I just have my eyes open for the most part, and I see the world, I think, sort of clearly. My son is not going to get that osmotically from me. He's not just going to be wide-eyed, wise, and understanding. He's just not. It's something he
yeah.
has to get on his own. Wisdom cannot be given. And
Oh,
so only God gives wisdom. Man cannot give wisdom to another man. I don't think so.
yeah.
I think that, but I do think that,
You think that, but we can put people in certain situations that I think that can make them more susceptible to wisdom, right?
you
So
can,
like,
yeah, go on, talk to me.
so again, I like to use my mom as an example. Like single mom, right? Adopted six boys. I'm the youngest. And one of the things she understood from a young age was, so there's two things that my mom did that I thought was absolutely incredible. One, when we were, I think it was like, we used to go to Disneyland when I was really young, like third, fourth, and fifth grade. But I believe once we hit sixth grade is when things changed, where she would take all of our presents, money that normally would go towards presents, rather than going to California for some ride, what she would do is she would actually take us to Little Rock, Arkansas to learn about Little Rock Nine, or she would take us to Memphis so we can learn about our history there, right? It's like she took us, and for listeners, my mom, I was adopted, so my mom is Caucasian. And so she would tell us that, hey, there's things about the Black culture I can't teach you. I have to take you to these places so you guys can learn certain things. So she put us in certain positions like that. Or without having a father, my mom put us in Boy Scouts because she said there's things that a man can only teach you, I can't teach you. So, so she puts us in Boy Scouts, and she was 100% correct because those men, very influential, right? I'll even give a shout out to one of the guys, Clay Miller, but like monumental. Like he put me like, dude, I couldn't. I remember there's days where it was like, so in Boy Scouts, if you wanted to go swimming, you have to pass the swimming test. So there's a distance you have to swim. And I was the only one in my troop that didn't know how to swim, right? Black man doesn't know how to swim. But I was the only one that couldn't swim. And I remember Clay kind of looking at me, being able to be like, hey, if you want to learn this, I will walk with you in this. Like I'll do this, but you're gonna
Yeah.
have to do it, right? And there's something about and within I think 2 or 3 days I learned how to swim that distance, and I was just with everybody else. But that taught me certain things that I learned a lot about perseverance that day. I learned about the ability to that there are limitations that I'm placing on myself, right? That at the end of the day, he didn't swim that for me. I still have to go do it, right? Uh, and so there's things like that my mom recognized that. So she put me in front of people that she, I think, wanted me to admire. I think it's people that she wanted me to look up to, right? When I went to the South and learned about, you know, some of the significant Black leaders in regards to American history, he did that for a reason. When it comes to learning about Africa, where I'm from, Ethiopia, he would make sure all my school projects, that's what I focused on. Because there's gems in there. We had books that had a lot of African stories, wisdom. Like, so it's like she just put me in certain positions that the more I ponder on it, the more I realize that if she wasn't attentive enough, if she didn't put me in those spaces, I couldn't have ran into that on my own, right? And I agree with you. I think wisdom does come from above. But when you have a mom that is following God with the best of her abilities, and she puts me in certain situations, right? In a way, it's kind of doing it. So I would say that maybe as a parent, maybe one of the things that we should consider is, are we putting our kids in positions, in situations where wisdom can, um, you know what I mean? Like wisdom can,
Yeah. It
um,
can take roots, at least the
yeah,
seeds. You
yeah.
know, you I think you're right, and I kudos to your mom. She sounds like a wonderful woman. Um,
I'd say so.
there is a. I don't believe that wisdom can be taught, but I do believe that we can learn to admire wisdom. We can learn to seek after it in hopes that we will find it someday. Um, and putting children in those kinds of situations is very helpful, giving them opportunities to sit with people who are far greater than them, introducing
Hmm.
them to whether it's history, whether it's biographies, whether it's just your friends. What kind of people do you hang out with, right? What kind of people you know what I mean? And let it's good for parents to be far greater than their children. Like be greater than your kids. You know what I mean? And if they admire you, they will they will learn a thing or two from you. Um, but that being said, Mr. Ekberg, I must depart. These people are closing.
Yeah, that sounds good, man. There's a real quick thing I'll say. 50 Cent talks about this in his relationship with Eminem, right? He's like, I'll never be greater than Eminem, nor do I desire to be, right? I think the desire to be greater than your teacher, I think is a very unhealthy thing that I think a lot of Americans, and I think just people in general, I wouldn't say American, I think there is a desire to be greater than, but I think the gem is for the master to raise the student in the best way possible. And for the student to always recognize that they need to humble themselves before the teacher is a healthy relationship. But when one desires to overleap the other, I think that's when you start to see a decay in whichever relationship it is. You'll start to see a decay. But my good friend, as always, good chatting with you. You
Good
got any
chatting with you.
wisdom for the people on the way out? Anything else you want to close out with?
50 Cent, what he said was fucking dope.
Yep.
That's
Yep.
what I'll, yeah,
Yep.
just amazing.
My brother, I'll catch you later.
Take care. God bless you, sir.
God bless you too, man.